So, welcome. Thanks very much for having me here. My name is Alex Barnett. I lead the Intuit developer group. And what our job is at Intuit is to enable third-party developers. Many of them are startups, tech startups, app developers, to integrate with our platform, with QuickBooks specifically. And then we make those apps that are integrated with QuickBooks available to our 2.5 million QuickBooks Online customers that help solve a whole bunch of problems and stuff that QuickBooks Online doesn't do. So we're a platform and really excited to be able to talk to you about the opportunity as we see it. This is not going to be an ad for our platform, but it is going to be a pitch, if you like, for why the startups and the entrepreneurs and everybody in this room should be really thinking about small businesses as a segment and as an opportunity that you should be paying attention to, because it's a huge opportunity. That's the way that we look at it at Intuit in the small business group. So why do we think it is a large opportunity? Well, numerically, it's a lot of people that we think represents the small business segment as a whole. Globally, we see the total addressable market as around 800 million small businesses. And that's global. And this is the engine that powers the world's economy. Just from the numbers point of view, it represents around 50% of the total world economy, and they're responsible for doing around 60% of all of the hiring that goes on around the globe. And within that market, we're seeing some really interesting shifts and trends occurring. I'm going to be speaking to three of these trends and shifts, but one noticeably is how the self-employed component of that total market is growing, and there's a lot of change occurring and therefore a lot of opportunity that's happening there. You might have heard Alex Chris earlier up on the main stage talking about self-employed, this segment that we identified and had a big opportunity, and we want to echo that to you guys to say, look, this is a really interesting opportunity to take and pay attention to. And from our perspective, we want to be able to solve a whole bunch of problems and jobs to be done for this market, but we recognize that we can't actually do that alone, and so want to encourage the startups and the tech startups to have a look at this segment as an opportunity for you to be able to focus and leverage that opportunity. So, depending on who you speak to, research varies, but the number that we like to use is that on average, small businesses are using around 17 apps to run their businesses. Now, apps really also include Excel, Google Docs, Google Slides, as well as the kind of apps that you would normally install on your phone or use in your browser to be able to run and manage your business. And the question for this community here is, how can you become one of those 17 apps that all these businesses are using to run their businesses? And there are so many jobs and a growing number of jobs to be done that can be served through technology and great creative thinking and solving and really nailing the kind of problems that are out there. It's everything from finding and paying employees and contractors. It's about estimating job costs and project progress, and scheduling appointments and managing your customers, and getting paid by your customers and paying the vendors, tracking and managing inventory, tracking and managing expenses. There are a lot of jobs, and not all of these jobs, even the same jobs, don't necessarily have to be solved in the same way, depending on the market, depending on the specialization, depending on the persona. There are many different ways of being able to optimize and figure out that job. Even within QuickBooks ourselves, we have apps that actually do some of the work that we do within QuickBooks, but those apps do it perfectly for that particular segment, for that particular customer. And that's awesome from our point of view, but it's giving you an example, a few examples about the opportunities as we see it, and the opportunities for the entrepreneurs and app developers here. There was a question that was asked in the previous session, and I was kind of interested in the answer. How many here would say that they are thinking about or in the process of starting a startup, tech-related startup? Just raise your hands just to get a sense. So that's looks like well over 50% around that. And how many already got a tech startup and are already in business? That's maybe around 10%. Okay, so I'm speaking to you guys, definitely. If you're looking to start a business, this is what we're talking here. Now there are three trends that we wanted to discuss and the implications around what we're seeing in this market. The first is around the gig economy and the rise of the gig economy. The second is about niche markets. I'm going to pronounce it niche markets. And artificial intelligence and machine learning, is it a friend or a foe for small businesses? And so that's what I want to be able to spend the rest of our time here talking about, how we see the opportunities and some of the challenges and the implications that you should at least be paying attention to in these areas. So the first one is the rise of the gig economy. As we know, there's an enormous influx into that market of freelancers and people who are working for themselves and maybe for different companies. And that growth that we're seeing is kind of interesting in its own right. What we're finding is that there are really a whole new tools and platforms that are solving the problem, all the way from helping contractors and the self-employed to find work, through to the employers that are looking to find those workers and to manage those workforces. And there's an explosion of platforms that are enabling that. And so we could look at kind of four major categories in this area around the gig economy. Okay. So we've got transportation, delivery. These aren't, by the way, all the four categories that we see it, but these are some pretty critical segments as we see it within the space of both finding people, services, things in the on-demand economy and in the gig economy in particular. So with Lyft, just to give you some numbers here, there are around 70,000 active drivers in the United States alone, connecting drivers with passengers over 1 million times every single day. So that's an example of how we're seeing a marketplace exploding. Another one is around finding work and talent through these marketplaces like Upwork, OnForce, OurNerd, Fiverr. And a couple of stats around Upwork to give you a sense there. There's millions of jobs that are actually posted on Upwork annually, with freelancers earning over $1 billion via the platform every year in terms of payouts for the work that they're doing, providing companies with over 3,500 skills to rent. And the other is around renting space or things. So Airbnb is an example. Sure, maybe a large number of you guys have used it. There are over 300 million check-ins since launch in 2008. Well over 1 million hosts now on Airbnb. And one fun fact is that the fastest growing segment for Airbnb hosts is the senior hosts. These are people who are over 60 years old, representing over 200,000 of those hosts today. And finally, the platforms that are providing kind of miscellaneous services. TaskRabbit, GigWalk would be an example. TaskRabbit recently acquired, actually last year, by IKEA. They've got 55,000 taskers on their platform, and they're really kind of enabling workers to earn over $35 on average an hour, which is quite a bit more, 5 times more than the minimum wage. So many of these are in the category of self-employed. They're earning money either on top of their 9-to-5 job, or they're earning their money exclusively via these platforms, and often are using multiple platforms. They could be the Lyft driver today, they could be on TaskRabbit doing some other kind of job the next day, or even renting out a room as a host on Airbnb. And the growth that we're seeing here is actually pretty explosive. In the United States, we're seeing around 3.9, around 4 million Americans that are working in the gig economy, and by 2021, we'll see that to come up to around 9.2 million. And the opportunity to point out here is that with the growth of the self-employed segment, with the gig economy, and the explosion of new platforms of which you could be a startup solving for that particular problem, there are also a whole bunch of providers and ecosystems being built around these matchmaking platforms as well. And there will be opportunities for startups to reduce the friction for the gig worker themselves or for the companies that are using their services. And also interesting to note that large companies are also beginning to adopt these platforms. So to give you an example, Upwork currently is serving 20% of the Fortune 500 companies. One particular example that I learned about was about Samsung. Samsung had a team called the On-Demand Talent Team. Their primary job is within Samsung is to staff quick turnaround projects, and they have been using now Upwork as a source for talent and finding the right talent and doing it quickly over traditional methods. They're finding 60% or reporting 60% cost savings in doing that, and reducing administrative time by 64%. And the onboarding process is 7 times faster by using Upwork than traditional methods. And so I'm pointing that out because even within those transactions that are occurring, even through the single platform, there are opportunities for startups then to be able to become part of that ecosystem and thrive within that ecosystem by reducing the friction in a number of different ways. But there are going to be some really interesting challenges in this whole space as well. So we know we're seeing these battles between, for example, Lyft and Uber around regulatory changes. You've got law changes that are almost trying to keep up with the digital economy in these marketplaces. We have tax laws that are getting changed or trying to catch up. We have employment law changes that are creating even more complexity around these platform and platform providers. But that said, with those challenges, there is an opportunity as well. So if you're a gig worker, are you expected to be able to keep track of all of these different employment laws, tax laws, and everything else that's changing? Or you as a service provider, or you as a tech startup solving that particular problem, how can you actually simplify that life for the small businesses, for the employers, and the gig economy workers as well? So it's getting more complex and things are moving pretty fast. But within that, creates an opportunity for you to be able to pay attention to. The second kind of big trend to take note of is niche markets. So maybe you're experiencing it yourself, but consumers are definitely being drawn to and attracted by niche brands, niche products, niche services, rather than going with the mainstream and enjoying those kind of and those classes of products increasingly. And millennials who have had they've got about $200 billion of annual buying power, are passionate about niche brands. So we see this kind of trends happening in microbreweries, artisan coffee. I was listening to the radio about how chocolate's going to go through the same thing. People walking away from Hershey's and wanting something kind of a little more niche, special, or maybe handmade. Is creating all these niche markets, niche products and niche services, and alongside of that creates opportunities for these specialized jobs then that need to be done that can be solved by tech startups and technology as well. So examples of the kind of jobs, if you take a small business around the corner, if you've been having coffee here, maybe not from Starbucks or from maybe Bliss down the road, or a couple of the other coffee places, and they're beautiful little spots, but they need these jobs to be done. So an example would be, how do they provide customer loyalty offerings to draw back repeat business, critical for any business as well as small business? How do they manage the food waste, whether it's getting rid of the meat, the cheeses, the cork wine? What about connecting the music system? So there's a kind of nice vibe, and who's going to be the provider for that? And who's going to take care of accepting payments? I mean, those are the kind of big obvious ones for any kind of company, but there are many, many, many jobs that need to be done. So to give you an example here, if you take the restaurant tech market map, this is an infographic from CB Insights that maps out. You could think of these as all these different jobs that need to get done, and all these different specialized jobs that need to get done just in the tech restaurant industry alone. And of course that presents opportunity, and there are going to be more niche markets and more jobs that do need to get done. But a big challenge, I think, to think about as you build solutions for small businesses is they have historically been notoriously difficult to reach as a customer. They're very fragmented, they're hard to engage, they're not like large corporates about how you go and sell. You've got to go off in a very different way to market. And so although there's a huge opportunity to be able to solve all of these different problems in all of these different specialized markets, that's evolving constantly, is how do you reach the small business customer at scale to be able to help drive the growth that you're looking for? And our advice is to go and somehow figure out to partner or insert yourself within an ecosystem, partner with an ecosystem or platform provider that is already solving a problem for millions of small businesses. And how can you complement that platform provider's core value and the core product that they're providing to be able to offer your own solution to a job that needs to be done? So the third final trend to be able to talk about and just take note of here is around artificial intelligence and machine learning and automation in general. And a question that comes up for Intuit regularly is the question, is AI, is it friend or foe for the small business? Is it something that small businesses should feel fearful about? Just as a data point, as it turns out, 87% of small businesses actually feel kind of excited and look optimistically at the opportunities that these technologies are able to bring, but it's not necessarily clear how they can take advantage of those. But then back to the question, is it a friend or a foe? Well, there's kind of two sides of the coin to have a look at it. One is the question around how many jobs are going to be displaced or eradicated, that is, people doing actual jobs versus technology doing jobs that are going to be displaced because of AI, ML, or automation. And the other side of the same coin is how many new opportunities are going to be created because of the advent of the disruption of AI and ML. And obviously, depending on which markets that you're looking at and who you're speaking to, you're going to get a lot of different answers and perspectives around that. But if we take three segments, three areas where And there's a lot of discussion going on around AI and ML and the impact that it'll have in those spaces. We can have a look at trucking. So I couldn't find the data point online just before I came here, but it was something like the #1 self-reported job that people write down on a census or something like that is truck driver. That is across the whole of the United States. We do know, though, that in 2014, 3 million people described themselves as truck drivers. That's around 2% of the total population of the states, I think. And obviously having self-driving cars and self-driving trucks has the potential to have enormous impact in that industry. There is the open question then on the other side of the coin, is like how many new industries or how many new jobs will be created in that industry because of AI and ML and automation. And there was a blog post published by Uber last week. They have a perspective, maybe a dog in the race around this, but their perspective is kind of interesting. What they were arguing was that on the upside, Uber estimates something like 1 million self-driving trucks are going to be on the road by 2028, maybe. But what they see is the shift happening from long-haul driving trips by these drivers, and a shift into solving more for the last mile and the more complicated traffic conditions, including the offloading and unloading of payloads, which itself could be impacted but by AI. So they're taking a kind of optimistic perspective, which is to say, yes, there's going to be a displacement of certain types of jobs or certain types of functions in the trucking, but it'll actually be moved over because, in fact, the total volume of activity occurring through the infrastructure is going to increase, and the shift is going to occur where the AI and the ML and the automation, robotics and the rest of it will actually change the work that's being done. So that's one example of how you could think about that. The other is around the food and the preparation industry. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics estimates something like 80,000 fast food jobs going to disappear by 2024. Another study, much larger number, says that 4.3 million cooks and servers are at high risk, they say, of fast casual cooks face the most immediate chance of losing their jobs as more and more technology automates their tasks, including grilling burgers, making salads, and brewing coffee. And I've seen people like McDonald's CEO say we're going to be investing in a whole bunch of automation of points of sale services. So that could be potentially a problem. And the warehouses as well. The plus side on that, apart from 2.4 million movers and warehouse workers that could face displacement, which is a massive number, is Amazon has added 80,000 warehouse employees in the United States, adding Kiva robots. So they're actually seeing an increase in number of employment because of the automation and the efficiency they're able to bring in. So the question for this community is, how can we create value in this changing economy by augmenting the things that humans are really good at doing so that they're able to provide more services, higher value to their end customers. Let's take a look at an example closer to home with the accountants. So the accountants are critical. They are a critical member of our ecosystem and partners to ensure its success. Let me just check. Thank you. And they're going through a big journey themselves, right? So if you think about what do accountants do, a lot of the work they do is about data entry, about data cleansing, and they are actually very worried and concerned that they could be effectively out of work because of this automation and technology and AI. Our perspective in educating the accountants is that in fact it's the opposite. We think there's a huge opportunity for them to be able to move from a commoditized data entry, data cleansing business, and in fact turn into technology advisors for small businesses. So a couple of data points for why we believe that's the case. Over 40% of small businesses report to be overwhelmed with the number of apps that they could possibly choose to run their business. They don't know which are the right apps for them. And over 60% are telling us that they would actually be willing to pay somebody to figure out what are the right apps, the right technology for them to be able to run their business more successfully. And we know that 90% of small businesses report to be more successful and more confident when they're connected with an accountant. And so we're leveraging that opportunity to help our accountant partners shift to more technology advisors on that front. And it turns out that by being able to recommend the right apps for our 2.45 million small business customers, they have a really critical role to play in that shift for their own value and what they're delivering. So just to wrap up here, the kind of three key areas that we wanted to just leave you as food for thought leaving here. One is, in general, the small business market is massive. 800 million small businesses, but it's going through a lot of change. And the rise of economy, of the gig economy, is really presenting a lot of opportunities as well as challenges for anybody serving that market. Regulatory changes, tax laws, employer laws, really actually creates an opportunity for you to be able to solve those problems for the gig economy and the employers that hire them. And also to make sure that you're partnering with the right ecosystem and platform providers that already have access to those millions of small businesses, and how can you figure out how to play a part and complement that platform provider in that area. And third, around AI and ML and technology, how can you help figure out to eliminate grunt work that these small businesses or the self-employed are doing, so that they in fact can spend more time actually managing their business and growing their business, having relationships with their customers or building out the new product, and provide more value rather than spending time doing the stuff that AI and automation is able to take care of. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I don't know if we have any time for any questions, but all right, that sounds great. So if you wanted to learn more about Intuit Developer, you can send a text. Thanks very much. Thank you.